Williams has, though, in your host benefit agreement, if I'm not mistaken, the one that I saw, there's an acknowledgement by this board that the value of those assets for assessment purposes drops 90% over 20 years. So if we do that, then we apply that same thing starting spring of 2020, then immediately, if we go to immediate fair market value, your fire and ambulance charges are gonna double or triple. And I'm only reflecting what we've had discussions in prior boards.
You say that in the way that you say your ambulance charges, fire will
The
double or
assessed rate
triple.
per-
You mean that the cost to the taxpayers?
Yes,
Right.
Okay.
correct. Thank you.
I mean, the reality, I think, is that, you know, we're putting new equipment on, you know, a project that's already got, 12 years of life on the foundations, the towers, the balance of plant. And we know we've got a 20-year useful life, and it's a wasting asset that depreciates just like a piece of equipment. It's not similar to a, real estate, commercial facility, something of that nature is the difference.
It's like buying a truck.
Right. The other thing that it does for the town is that it guarantees the town, I think that the total over the 20 years is like $4.5 million. It guarantees, it locks in the town's revenue stream from the project for 20 years, whereas with what we have currently, the town doesn't have that guarantee in place.
Dave, any comment?
No, not right at the moment.
Mike? Brad?
Not sure. I wasn't happy with taking a large amount up front, taking less over the years when they originally did it.
Is the IDA agreeing to a 5%? Do you know what they're, for the pilot?
The pilot is flat for 20 years.
Right, but are they taking a decrease? They're not, correct?
The pilot payment is flat for 20 years. It does not decrease.
But is it's not, the pilot's not the same as what it would be for next year. Am I right? Is it set at 150,000, right? Is that right?
So the pilot would have also expired, of course. It wouldn't have run the full 20-year
Right,
course.
so they've agreed to take a decrease,
Correct.
because otherwise, I think it was 160.
Yes,
Was
the
the
pilot
town's-
does not increase through 2028. That's correct.
We're gonna need to, make a resolution to make these necessary changes to the host community agreements. Because there's two, there's the Dutch Hill and there's the Cohocton one.
Can I please point out that, once again, there are two leaseholders sitting on the town board. That's a violation of the Attorney General's wind ethics law. There's a third member whose son has a lease and his wife has an easement. He also has to recuse himself, so you don't really have a quorum.
Well, the town board still has to act, however, so there is a rule in New York called the rule of necessity, and if that is the case, that the board members need to disclose that, but that does not prevent them from voting.
Well, I think the AG's laws reads a little bit differently than that.
Well, you can't stop the working of the town board because there's nobody to act. They still have to do their business. If they have to act on something, they're the only ones that can act on this. They're the only ones that can issue a determination on this, can approve it. Then the rule of necessity says that the members who may have, if they do have a conflict, they need to disclose it, but then they still can vote, and their vote is proper.
Anybody, this is a question for you, Kevin or Ben, either one of you answer it, but, if we have leaseholders on the board and everything, are their contracts already in place?
Yes.
So it doesn't make any difference.
There's no,
Well, that's the other issue, is there an interest? Do they even have an interest in this?
Right.
Or if you feel that that creates some sort of, if the member feels that that creates some sort of conflict, still, it can't stop the board from acting. I mean, the board can't go into limbo and not
Right.
do anything because of it.
Well, there is an issue that there doesn't have to be a pilot, and they could be taxed at normal industrial utility rates. And in their contracts, it says in their contracts that they have to do their best, what's the term? Do the best thing they can to.
This is the host benefit agreement, and it runs out in 2028. So the alternative is to have the town have no revenue from 2028 to 2041.
$2 million less.
Right. It's millions of dollars of difference.
These, new measures that you had to do, are they the exact that Labella said you needed? Have they looked at these and they've okayed them, right?
Yes.
All the exhibits that are in here?
That's right.
Okay. Wanted to make sure they were done.
Yep.
I guess I'll make the motion that we approve the updates of the existing host community agreements and include, adopt a new schedule of payments for the period. Need a second.
So I do have a lease with CPP2. I don't perceive a conflict, and I will second that motion.
Excuse me, Supervisor Johnson, what did you say, after necessary updates? I just missed the last thing that you said.
And to include, adopt a new schedule of payments for the period amended
Host agreement.
on the host community agreement
What is the period?
from 2019 to 2042.
41.
We've already made 2019, 2020 to
2020 to
2021.
2021. That's right, so. Any further discussion?
No?
Martha?
Councilman Small?
Aye.
Councilman Dusenberry?
I'm a leaseholder, and I do not have a conflict of interest. Aye.
Supervisor Johnson?
Aye.
Councilman Gilman?
Aye.
Councilman Towner?
I don't have a lease with them, but my wife does. It's not really a conflict of interest because you're not gonna get any more money or anything, so
Now we gotta do, vote on the budget. We all gone through and everything. Final calculation did come out to 2.8% increase. The final calculation did come out to a 2.8 increase in the overall budget. Need a motion motion to adopt it?
I'll move it.
2 seconds? Ronnie seconded. Any further discussion? Martha?
Councilman Small?
Aye.
Councilman Dusenberg?
Aye.
Supervisor Johnson?
Aye.
Councilman Gilman?
Aye.
Councilman Sauer?
At, I think it was our last meeting, our officer in charge, Officer Barnhart, submitted a request for a long gun, and I'm assuming you're talking about like an AK or an AR-15 type weapon. We had some discussions with Mr. Bastine and some of the other sheriffs and everything around. I was kind of questioning the reason that we would need an assault rifle in the town of Cohocton. Wait a minute, let me finish. And then in discussions with some of the other people and everything, it's not only for what they face here, but we're also called on to assist the sheriff's department, state police, and other areas, and there have been some instances recently that the reason that they were controlled was because there were long guns available. Because the actions that they're taking now are a lot of times outside of the range of your normal shotgun, which we also have. So, I've addressed my concerns. I don't know about the rest of the board here.
I mean, if we can't trust our police officers with a rifle, I mean, there's something wrong.
Well,
I have no problem with it at all.
The other thing is, they're all trained and certified for the use of those.
Mark, you asked for one or in both vehicles. More than likely, if you're called out, you're gonna need both vehicles, correct? Both, you need
It
all
really depends.
officers?
If we get called out here, we're gonna have more than one. I'll come from home, Dave being a certified instructor, he'll come from home. So we would actually need one in each car. We can get them at the state bed, which is very.
That's what my question was
reasonable.
gonna be, if they were gonna be available on the state bid, which I assume they would be.
Right.
You got it in your budget for this year, or it'll be next? Yeah. Then I'll make the motion that you purchase two.
What other local, small police departments currently have these?
Wayland PD has two. There
Sheriff's.
was actually a program within the last 3 years where patrol rifles, AR-15 style semi-automatic rifles were made available to smaller local agencies. And Bath has them, Cornell has them, Canisteo has them, Corning has them. As far as Addison PD, I haven't spoken with anybody there, but my guess would be that they have them.
I'll second the motion.
All those communities you mentioned are considerably larger than Cohocton.
Let me just, again, the way we would respond if there was an active shooter at the Wayland School is we would go. Chances are, we would probably be the second or third unit there. Conceivably, we could be the first unit there. If we, again, depending on the circumstances, so I'll just throw this out. If there's a report of an active shooter in the Wayland School, there's probably going to be numerous reports, conflicting information. So the closest entrance that we would reach when we went on to the Wayland Cohocton campus would be the auditorium entrance. If we go in that auditorium entrance, which currently it's under construction, so that wouldn't be available, but if we were to go into that entrance and the person, the bad actor, was down the hallway towards the elementary building, the length of that hallway is 1/10 of a mile. It's 528 feet, 7 inches. If all we had was a handgun or a shotgun, and the perpetrator presented themselves, we would not be able to effectively engage them. And again, if they were moving away from the auditorium entrance down towards the elementary building, they're gonna be increasing that range as they go. The officer would be expected to close on the perpetrator. But if you're moving, you're not gonna be shooting, because it's gonna be a very difficult thing to do, to engage while you're moving. Especially, you're gonna be moving rapidly. So, again, it's a tool. It's not gonna be something that would be every situation where we would present a firearm, that it would be the necessary or appropriate tool, and that would be part of the training. The shotgun, again, in certain circumstances, would be a more appropriate tool than pro rifle. And in other circumstances, the handgun would be more appropriate than a shotgun or patrol rifle. And that goes into the training of the officers to recognize the situation. Patrol rifle, again, may not necessarily be used, but it would be a very good tool to have on hand should the situation warrant the use of a patrol rifle. Within the last 2 years, there was a trooper that was killed, and I knew him. They had a barricaded subject, and he and another officer were taking cover. They had established a perimeter around the house. They were the closest 2 officers to the house. They were roughly 40 yards away. The barricaded subject exited the house and engaged the 2 officers and killed the trooper. The trooper and the officer he was paired with had patrol rifles. In the course of trying to rescue the trooper, the other officer grabbed a hold of the trooper and was pulling him back to a position of cover, concealment, and he engaged the bad guy, I'll use the word loosely, and drove him back into the house. He was actually trying to get out, not just engage the officers that were about 40 yards away, but he was also trying to get out into a wooded area so he could flank the other officers that were part of the barricade, the perimeter. So the officer was dragging the trooper back, presented his patrol rifle, managed to fire several rounds, and force the perpetrator back into the house. Obviously, with the advent of shots and the calls of officer down, that creates a very chaotic situation. And he attempted to take advantage of that by leaving the front door, again, to go out and engage the officers that were in the front part of the perimeter, around the front of his house. And trooper there engaged him from over 75 yards away and shot him and basically inflicted a mortal wound. Didn't instantly incapacitate him, and he went back in the house and subsequently took his own life. But if it weren't for those officers having patrol rifles, I dare say that there could very well have been more than one officer killed. But more importantly, had he managed to get into the woods and leave the scene, he had other people in mind that he had hostile intentions towards. So the presence of the patrol rifles, again, didn't save the trooper's life, but they definitely possibly saved other police officers' lives and definitely prevented him from getting loose, to go out into the public.